we're at about 33% right now. Okay, so this question number 1, I give it a special name. I call this a double triangle question because you have to draw 2 triangles. Now these questions that I give special names to, I do that because if you have a special name connected to it and you recognize it right away, it just makes it super easy to solve. Now just a little bit of review of what we learned yesterday. Yesterday we were introduced to our sum and difference identities. We had 4 of them for sine and cos. Well, 2 for sine, 2 for cos, and of course, 2 for tan. There they are. And so I know since you have no activities in the evening, you spent last night memorizing these formulas so that you got them to the mostly memorized stage. Perfect.
I memorized them before I joined school.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I can't wait till grade 12. I'm going to start memorizing formulas. Double triangle question. Why? Because you're going to get an angle alpha, and there's going to be enough information to tell what quadrant it's in. This is the easiest one because this question actually says it's in quadrant 3. So you draw an angle in quadrant 3. You label a reference angle for alpha, alpha reference angle. Make your triangle back to the nearest x-axis because a reference angle is always back to the nearest x-axis. And on this triangle, since we know cos is negative 3/5 adjacent over hypotenuse. Now when I label the triangle, I just use positive values because I'm actually labeling the length of that side is 3, the length of the hypotenuse is 5. Hey, you recognize this triangle? What's the other side? 4. And then from that triangle, we already knew that cos of alpha was negative 3/5. We now know that sine of alpha is negative 4/5. Negative because it's in quadrant 3 as well. That's our first triangle. We needed to make a triangle for alpha, but there's a beta angle as well. This is why I call it a double triangle question, because we're going to need to draw a triangle for beta. Again, this question, it's really straightforward. It tells us it's in quadrant 2. Some questions you'll get this. Sine of beta is equal to 1/3, and tan of beta is less than 0. Then you would know that it's in quadrant 2. Because you'd have to go to your cast rule and say tan is negative, sine is positive, that's in quadrant 2. So sometimes these questions, you have to do a little bit of work to find out which quadrant it's in. But this one's really straightforward. It just told us it's in quadrant 2. Label your reference angle for beta. Make your triangle back to the nearest x-axis. We know sine is 1/3. Are you getting really good at a squared plus b squared equals c squared? The other side's going to be square root of 8. Perfect. So we already knew that sine of beta was 1/3. We now know that cos of beta is negative, because it's in quadrant 2, root 8/3. That's our preliminary work with 2 triangles. Why did we need that preliminary work? Well, this question asked us to find sine alpha plus beta. And according to the formula that apparently everybody's already memorized, that's sine alpha cos beta plus cos alpha sine beta. Yes?
Is there an error writing A and B instead of alpha and beta?
In this question there would be, because you've changed the variables. So how do you write an alpha? You start at the top, down, and swoop. It's pretty easy. How do you write a beta? Start at the bottom, go up, and swoop there. It's like, do they still do that in elementary school? I'm not sure, because I come around and I've seen various forms of writing.
I think by grade 12 you have, like by high school,
Yep.
you just make your own.
You make your own, but it used, like when I went to elementary school, you were taught the proper way to make the letter B. Okay? Proper way to make the letter B is you start at the top, down, and swoop. You never, but I've witnessed, I go around and I see some people make their B's like that. Yeah. So every letter has a, yeah. So I just saw, how many people make their B like that? You just did, right? And then, as opposed to that. Now the reason you were, oh, we're getting off topic here with letter B. Okay. The reason that it would have been taught printing like that is because then in writing you could continue it more fluidly, whatever. Anyways, now I don't think they just say, just make your B whatever you like as long as you can read it, you'll be fine. But there's alpha, there's beta. Don't change them. If the question has alpha and beta, keep them alpha and beta. Now, the next thing we're going to do, I did this with the other class. This class, there's 7 of you today, so we're going to do a survey. Usually when I do this survey, about 50% make a mistake in the next step, and 50% do it right. This morning's class, 70% made the mistake. Now, even if I showed you the next step right now and you were like, wrote it down in your notes, if you're going to make the mistake now, you would make it even if I showed you the right way to do it. It's one of those mistakes that you need to know if you're going to make it or not, so you have to do the next step, and I'm going to take a survey. You just have to substitute values in, right? We've got our we've done both our triangles. We got our values here on the left. You just have to plug them in. Don't have to do any more than plugging them in, and I'll take a survey how you do. Okay, you guys were as close to 50% as you could get. There's 7 of you. 4 of you did it correct. 3 of you made the mistake. Okay, so the mistake is that you want to plug in something for alpha, but you do not know alpha. You need your calculator to find alpha. You know all of sine alpha is -4/5. So when we substitute here, we have to substitute all of this for -4/5. And those of you that made the mistake just wrote the -4/5 for alpha. And if you didn't make it now, you would do that same mistake on your quiz. So this is why you have to pay extra. There's going to still be some people that even though they made the mistake now and they're like, oh, and paying attention to it, you're still going to make it the second time on the quiz. And then I'm going to say, you made the mistake again. You're like, oh. And then there's an even smaller portion that will still do it again on the test. Yes? What? Look at what I have here. For sine alpha, there's only sine alpha listed once. It's listed right here. It's -4/5. For cos beta, it's only listed once. It's -√8/3. Plus cos alpha is -3/5. And sine beta is +1/3. So that's our substitution. And now you have to write your final answer as a single fraction. We have 4 fractions right now. If I multiply these first 2, 4√8/15, that's one less fraction. And multiply these 2, -3/15. I didn't simplify them because they already have a common denominator. Some of you would be able to do both of these steps. 4√8 minus 3/15. That is a single fraction. That's your final answer. If it was a multiple choice, why would the answer be, wow. Why would the answer be 8√2 minus 3/15? Well, because it's the same number, yes. That's right. But why? What did they do?
They did like √16, √8, and then turned it into one radical, and then simplified it to 8.
Possibly. So what he's saying is I could change the √4 to this, right? And then what's 8 times 16? 128. And then, what did you do with 128? Divided by 2, so you had 64 times 2, and the square root of 64 is 8. Yes, you could do that, but you're dealing with much bigger numbers. Probably is easier to think of 8 as 4 times 2. And then square root of 4 is 2, so that 2 comes out in front. 2 times 4 is 8. That'll be a little bit, right? If you wanted to go to this 16 times 8, 128 and have to work with it, works as well. Okay? Perfect. So we get it as a single fraction in the end. And these questions that say determine the exact value, that means we have to leave it with square roots and stuff like that. Leave it as a fraction of sine or cos or tan of alpha plus beta or alpha minus beta. Always have to draw your triangles. One triangle for alpha, one triangle for beta, and then substitute in. But that substituting in is where we can make a little arithmetic mistake. Even if you write sine and cos and then ignore the mistake and do it right after that, you still lose the mark for that mistake. Okay, so questions for practice, 8 and 13.